The rainy visit. On a chilly autumn afternoon, the rain poured in relentless sheets, making the streets glisten and glint in the city lights. Jared McCall, a middle-aged man with strong features softened by a calm, humble demeanor, strode into a renowned luxury car dealership. His clothes, a simple flannel shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed boots were soaked, and his coat looked worn from years of use. He had saved up for this moment, determined to treat himself after years of hard work. The polished glass doors glided open silently, welcoming him into the pristine, well-lit showroom, where high-end vehicles gleamed like treasures under meticulously placed spotlights. Inside, a subtle scent of leather and luxury permeated the air, mixed with a faint hum of classical music. Jared's gaze settled on a sleek black convertible parked proudly in the center of the showroom, its streamlined curves catching the light. He couldn't help but admire it. The craftsmanship, the engine's growl he could almost hear, the dream it represented for him. However, Jared's moment of admiration was interrupted by the cold, assessing stares of the staff. By the receptionist's desk, Ethan and Lucas, two sales representatives, exchanged smirks and whispered among themselves. They watched him, their expressions lined with contempt, as if his soaked clothes and plain appearance meant he didn't belong. Jared didn't mind the stares. He was used to being underestimated. He worked his way across the showroom, taking in each car with a practiced eye, his admiration untainted by the dismissive glances from the staff. His journey brought him to the black convertible, and he ran his hand along its pristine hood. The smooth surface felt cold and perfect under his touch. The receptionist, Sarah, noticed him from her desk, her gaze catching his as she sent a polite, albeit slightly distracted, greeting. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I help you with anything?" Jared smiled warmly, tipping his head in greeting. "Good afternoon. I'm just taking a look for now. Thank you." He turned back to the car, fully absorbed in the details. Moments later, Ethan and Lucas, both wearing neatly pressed suits and perfectly styled hair, walked over, their expressions thinly masked with polite interest. Ethan, a tall man with a confident, slightly condescending smirk, was the first to speak. "Can I assist you with anything, sir?" Ethan asked, his tone forced, his eyes assessing Jared with undisguised amusement. Jared turned to face them, nodding. "Yes, actually. I'd love to know more about this convertible. Looks like a beauty." Lucas couldn't hide the mocking smirk that tugged at his lips. "It's definitely a beauty, all right. Are you sure this is the kind of car you're looking for?" he asked, glancing at Jared's worn clothes and muddy shoes, clearly implying he should look at something more modest. Ethan chuckled under his breath. "Yes, we have some more accessible models you might want to check out," he added, gesturing towards the economy vehicles displayed in a distant corner of the showroom. Jared's smile remained, but his eyes hardened slightly. He took a measured breath, then spoke evenly. "I'd appreciate the details on this car if you don't mind." Ethan paused, surprised by Jared's calm persistence, but quickly resumed his pitch with a slight roll of his eyes. "Certainly. This model here is equipped with a V8 engine, offering 500 horsepower, and is one of the most advanced sports cars in its class. Top-of-the-line aerodynamics and design ensure it's both fast and stylish." "Impressive," Jared murmured, taking in the information. "And the price?" Lucas chimed in, barely concealing his scorn. "Around $250,000. I'm assuming financing is something you'd need information about as well." Ethan laughed quietly, but Jared kept his expression neutral. "Yes, that would be helpful," he replied, his voice level, betraying no annoyance. Ethan sighed, clearly bothered by having to spend more time on someone he had no faith would make the purchase. "Of course, but let's make sure we're aligned with realistic expectations here," he said. "Why don't you take a look at the models over there?" Jared nodded slowly, knowing exactly what Ethan was implying. He'd been dismissed, his presence deemed unworthy of attention or respect. He gave a polite nod, thanked them, and exited the dealership, ignoring the whispers and chuckles that followed him. As he walked back out into the rain, his mind raced. He had a plan that was much bigger than just purchasing a car. Sarah, the receptionist, watched him leave, feeling an unshakable pang of guilt. She'd seen the dismissive glances and overheard the disdain in Ethan and Lucas's voices, and her heart sank. She knew that appearances could be deceiving, and something about Jared's presence had caught her attention. He had handled the situation with quiet dignity, his calm persistence speaking volumes. She wondered who he was, really, and what had brought him to this particular dealership. There was a weight to his demeanor, an unspoken resolve that had left a lasting impression on her. The return visit. The dealership hummed with activity 2 days later. The rain clouds had cleared, and the showroom was bathed in morning sunlight, each car's polished surface gleaming under the rays. Sarah, the receptionist, was at her desk, typing away at a spreadsheet and watching customers filter in and out. But amidst the bustle, she felt her thoughts drifting back to the encounter from 2 days ago, with the unassuming man in worn clothes who had come in and left an impression on her. She was lost in thought when the glass doors slid open, and Jared stepped back into the showroom, dressed in his usual simple clothes, a cotton shirt, jeans, and well-loved boots. He looked slightly different this time, still humble, but with a calm resolve that gave him a quiet strength. His gaze was steady as he walked toward the receptionist's desk, and Sarah looked up, recognizing him instantly. "Good morning, sir," she greeted, her voice genuine, a slight warmth in her smile. "Good morning," Jared replied, smiling back with a nod. Before Sarah could say anything more, Ethan and Lucas, both having noticed him from across the room, approached with raised eyebrows. Ethan looked particularly annoyed, but Lucas's curiosity got the better of him. "Oh, you're back," Ethan said, his tone cold but polite. "Back to check out the models in the budget-friendly section." Jared looked at him calmly. "Actually, I'd like to speak with the manager. Is he available?" Ethan hesitated, clearly irritated, and glanced at Lucas, who gave a small shrug. "Mr. Harris is in a meeting right now, but I could ask if he's available later," Ethan replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm, as if hoping Jared would take the hint and leave. But Jared simply smiled, unbothered. "That's fine. I'll wait." Ethan rolled his eyes, muttering something to Lucas as he walked away, while Lucas chuckled and returned to another customer. Sarah, sensing the tension, got up and approached Jared with a sympathetic smile. "Would you like a coffee while you wait, sir?" "That would be great, thank you," Jared replied, genuinely appreciative. While she prepared the coffee, Jared wandered around the showroom, inspecting each car carefully. But this time he looked deeper, noticing the fine details and precision of the designs. He had always appreciated the craftsmanship in these luxury vehicles. The years he'd spent working in his own field gave him an eye for quality. When Sarah returned with the coffee, she found Jared admiring the sleek black sedan. She handed him the cup and offered a hesitant smile. "This is one of my favorites," she said. "The design is so elegant, it's hard not to appreciate it." Jared nodded thoughtfully, taking a sip of coffee. "You're right. Each one of these cars is a work of art in its own way. It takes real dedication to create something like this." There was a brief silence as they both admired the vehicle, the shared appreciation between them creating a moment of understanding. But Sarah couldn't hold back her curiosity any longer. "If you don't mind me asking, what brings you back here, sir? I mean, after how you were received last time." Jared glanced at her, a faint smile on his lips. "I've always been fascinated by cars, but there's more to it. Sometimes you learn a lot about a place by how people treat you when they think you don't belong." Sarah looked at him, sensing a deeper meaning in his words. Before she could ask more, however, Ethan reappeared, clearly annoyed. "Mr. Harris can see you now," he said, gesturing toward the manager's office with a forced smile. "Thank you," Jared said to Sarah, giving her a nod of gratitude before following Ethan to the office. The manager, Mr. Harris, was a polished man in his late 50s with silver hair and an authoritative air. He looked up as Jared entered, his expression professional yet cautious. "Good morning, Mr. McCall." "Jared McCall," he said, extending his hand. Mr. Harris shook it, offering a neutral smile as they both took a seat. "So, Mr. McCall, I understand you're interested in one of our vehicles?" Mr. Harris asked, his eyes giving a quick, appraising glance at Jared's attire. He was doing his best to be polite, but it was clear he was perplexed by Jared's return. "That's right," Jared replied calmly. "But before we get into specifics, I'd like to address the service I received on my previous visit." Mr. Harris's smile faltered slightly, and he glanced at Ethan, who was lingering by the door. "I'm sorry to hear that. May I ask what happened?" Jared's eyes didn't leave Mr. Harris's as he spoke, his voice steady and measured. "Your employees made it clear that they didn't consider me a serious buyer. They judged me based on my appearance, and I believe, because of my race. I find that unacceptable." Mr. Harris shifted uncomfortably in his chair, glancing at Ethan with a warning look. "Mr. McCall, I apologize for any disrespect you may have encountered. This dealership prides itself on professionalism, and I assure you, we don't condone that kind of behavior." "Ethan," he said, his tone sharper, "can you explain yourself?" Ethan's face turned pale as he stammered, "Mr. Harris, I didn't realize he was a serious buyer." He didn't look like someone who'd be interested in the type of vehicles we offer. Jared watched Ethan's discomfort with a calm expression. "The kind of treatment I experience shouldn't depend on whether I'm a serious buyer or not," he said. "Every customer deserves respect, regardless of how they look or dress." Mr. Harris nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "You're absolutely right, Mr. McCall. I'll be addressing this issue internally, I assure you." Jared gave a small nod, but his expression held a knowing quality. "Good. Now, about the car. I'd like to discuss the red convertible." A flicker of surprise crossed Mr. Harris's face. "Of course," he replied, regaining his composure. "Ethan, please fetch the files on the red convertible." Ethan quickly left, glad to escape the tension, while Mr. Harris turned his attention back to Jared, his demeanor more attentive now. "Mr. McCall, I apologize again for the initial reception. Please know that we value all our customers here." Jared nodded, accepting the apology but clearly unmoved. He had experienced this type of treatment before, and he was no stranger to shallow apologies. But there was a sense of calm determination in his gaze, as if he was playing a long game that only he fully understood. When Ethan returned with the files, Jared took a look at the financing options, studying them intently. "I'll need to review these in detail," he said, standing up. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Harris. I'll be back soon to finalize everything." As Jared walked back to the reception desk, Sarah looked up, sensing that something significant had happened. She managed a small smile, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. "Will we be seeing you again, sir?" she asked, genuinely hoping he would return. Jared nodded, his smile kind but determined. "Oh yes," he replied. "You'll be seeing me again very soon." Sarah watched as he left, the quiet strength of his presence lingering in the air, even after he was gone. There was something about Jared that struck her, a purpose, a steadiness that seemed to carry an unspoken promise. She had no idea what was coming, but she felt that Jared McCall was going to leave a lasting impact on the dealership in ways no one could foresee. As she watched him walk away, she couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of a story that would unfold in unexpected ways. And deep down, she knew that this unassuming man had come to change more than just the dealership's bottom line. The unexpected alley. It was Saturday morning, and the dealership was buzzing with activity. The sunlight streamed in through the tall glass windows, casting a warm glow over the polished cars and shining surfaces. Mr. Harris, the manager, was reviewing sales reports at his desk, feeling the pressure of reaching the month's targets. The bustling atmosphere was filled with ringing phones and the steady hum of conversations between salespeople and customers. Little did Mr. Harris and his team know that today would bring an unexpected visit. The sleek glass doors slid open, and Jared walked in, but this time he was not alone. Standing beside him was an older gentleman named Robert Carter, dressed in a finely tailored suit that spoke of elegance and quiet authority. Robert was tall and lean, with salt and pepper hair and a presence that commanded respect. His eyes were keen, observant, and hinted at a lifetime of experience. He was Jared's longtime mentor and business partner, a figure well known in high-end industries for his sharp insights and integrity. As the two men walked into the showroom, the employees couldn't help but take notice. There was an undeniable contrast between the unassuming man they'd dismissed a few days prior and the dignified figure by his side. Their presence together raised eyebrows and aroused curiosity, even among those who had initially dismissed Jared. Sarah, who was attending to another customer, looked up and caught Jared's eye, offering him a genuine smile. She sensed that something significant was about to unfold and felt an odd mixture of anticipation and nervous excitement. Ethan, who had witnessed Jared's last visit, immediately took notice. He nudged Lucas and nodded in Jared's direction. "Check it out," he whispered, smirking slightly. "Looks like he brought someone important to impress." Lucas chuckled under his breath, still amused. "Maybe he's got a friend who actually has the money for these cars," he muttered, although he felt a small, nagging doubt. The older gentleman accompanying Jared seemed like someone they shouldn't underestimate. "Good morning, gentlemen," Ethan said, approaching them with a practiced, courteous smile aimed squarely at Robert, completely ignoring Jared. "How can I assist you today?" Robert gave him a calm, assessing look, his gaze unwavering. "We'd like to speak with the manager," he said in a voice that was both polite and commanding. "Oh, of course, right this way," Ethan replied, his tone filled with newfound respect. He led them to Mr. Harris's office, stealing quick glances at Robert, who exuded an air of authority that left Ethan feeling slightly intimidated. Mr. Harris, busy reviewing inventory numbers, looked up as the three men entered his office. He immediately recognized Robert Carter. Although they had never met in person, he knew of Robert's reputation and success. Quickly, Mr. Harris rose from his chair, extending a hand to the older man. "Mr. Carter, it's an honor to have you here. Please, have a seat." Robert nodded and shook his hand, then gestured toward Jared. "Thank you. I'm here today on behalf of Mr. Jared McCall. We're here to discuss his interest in purchasing one of your vehicles." Mr. Harris's smile faltered for a brief moment as he looked at Jared, finally connecting the dots. This was the same man who had come in just a few days ago, the one who had been brushed off by his staff. Clearing his throat, Mr. Harris tried to maintain his composure. "Of course. Please, have a seat, Mr. McCall. I apologize if there were any misunderstandings during your previous visits." Jared inclined his head, acknowledging the apology without letting Mr. Harris off too easily. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. I'm here because I'm interested in purchasing a vehicle. However, I'm also here to discuss the experience I had with your staff." Mr. Harris nodded stiffly, glancing at Ethan, who stood near the door, clearly uncomfortable. "I understand, Mr. McCall. Please rest assured, we take matters of customer service very seriously here, and I apologize on behalf of my staff if you felt disrespected in any way. Rest assured, we'll address this." Robert leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "Mr. Harris, with respect, I believe it's important that you understand what occurred here wasn't a simple misunderstanding. Jared's treatment was unacceptable, and it reflects poorly on this dealership and your leadership. His experience here was more than just disappointing. It was humiliating." Mr. Harris' expression turned serious, and he gave a curt nod. "I understand, Mr. Carter. You're absolutely correct. Ethan," he said, his voice tight, "would you mind explaining to Mr. McCall and Mr. Carter why you felt it was appropriate to treat him with such dismissiveness?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his usual confidence fading. "Mr. Harris, I didn't think he was a serious buyer," he stammered. It seemed like he wasn't here to actually make a purchase. Jared, observing Ethan's discomfort, leaned forward. "So, based on my appearance, you assumed I wasn't worth your time. And because of that assumption, you chose to treat me as if I didn't belong here." Ethan couldn't meet Jared's gaze. I apologize, sir. I didn't realize." Robert spoke up, his voice low and deliberate. "Ethan, let me be clear. It's your job to welcome every customer who walks through that door with respect, regardless of appearance. When you decided Jared wasn't worth your time, you not only disrespected him, but you also disrespected this entire dealership." Ethan's face flushed, and he swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand, Mr. Carter. It won't happen again." Mr. Harris cleared his throat, glancing between Robert and Jared. "Please accept my sincerest apologies, Mr. McCall. We will be taking immediate steps to ensure our staff is properly trained to treat all customers with the respect they deserve." Jared looked at Mr. Harris, weighing his words carefully. He knew this could be a moment for change if handled correctly. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. I appreciate the apology. But it's not just about me. I'm not the only person who walks in here and gets treated this way, I'm sure. Changing the culture in this dealership will take more than just an apology." Mr. Harris nodded, understanding the gravity of Jared's words. "You're absolutely right, Mr. McCall. I'll make sure this is addressed. Starting today, we'll implement new customer service protocols to ensure this doesn't happen again." Robert leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "That's a start, Mr. Harris. I trust you'll follow through." After a brief silence, Jared spoke up. "Now, about the car I'm interested in." Mr. Harris nodded, grateful for the shift in conversation. "Certainly. I understand you were interested in our red convertible. It's one of our top models, equipped with high-end features and designed for exceptional performance." Jared nodded, giving a slight smile. "Yes, that's the one. I'd like to finalize the purchase today." A flicker of surprise crossed Mr. Harris's face, but he quickly regained his composure. "Of course. Ethan, please prepare the necessary paperwork for Mr. McCall." As Ethan hurriedly left the office to gather the documents, Jared and Robert stood, ready to leave. Mr. Harris extended a hand to Jared, looking him in the eye. "Mr. McCall, thank you for giving us the opportunity to make things right. We're grateful for your business and your patience." Jared shook his hand, but his expression remained reserved. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. I hope that in the future, no one else will go through the same experience I did here. I look forward to picking up the car tomorrow." As they left the office, Sarah met them by the showroom floor, her face lighting up when she saw Jared. "Mr. McCall," she said warmly, "congratulations on the new car." Jared smiled, extending a hand. "Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate how you treated me. Your kindness didn't go unnoticed." Sarah beamed, grateful for his acknowledgement. She had a feeling this was more than a simple purchase for Jared. As Jared and Robert left the dealership, the staff watched them go, and the atmosphere was thick with whispers and speculation. Sarah, however, stood in silent respect. She sensed that Jared's visit had left a lasting impact on everyone present, from the manager down to the junior sales staff. In the days to come, Mr. Harris implemented a complete overhaul in the dealership's customer service protocols, instilling values of respect and professionalism. Training sessions were mandatory, and every employee, including Ethan, was required to participate. Jared's visit had acted as a catalyst, igniting a change that had been long overdue. For Sarah, it was a reminder that true respect had no price tag, and for Ethan and the others, it was a humbling experience. The dealership became more than just a showroom for luxury cars. It transformed into a place where every customer felt valued. And for Jared, the experience reminded him of the importance of standing up for oneself with quiet dignity, knowing that real change often begins with a single act of courage. The power of reputation. The next morning, The dealership felt different. Whispers spread among the staff about what had happened the day before. It wasn't every day that a customer walked in and left such a lasting impression, not only with his words, but also with the authority and conviction behind them. Jared McCall had single-handedly shaken the dealership's foundation, exposing flaws in its treatment of customers and the assumptions embedded in its culture. By noon, Jared's name had circulated through every department. Ethan and Lucas, who had once laughed at him, now found themselves the subject of disapproving looks. The consequences of their actions became even more evident when Mr. Harris, the manager, gathered everyone for an all-hands meeting in the showroom. Mr. Harris' usually calm demeanor was visibly strained, and a sense of tension filled the room. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, looking around the showroom at his staff. "I'm sure you've all heard about Mr. McCall's visit yesterday. As many of you know, Mr. McCall was not just any customer. He's a respected figure in the industry, someone who has worked his way up and values hard work and respect. I have reason to believe his presence here will affect us in ways we may not have anticipated." Ethan and Lucas stood at the back, their faces pale and unreadable. They exchanged nervous glances, clearly aware of the uncomfortable spotlight they were under. "We're a luxury dealership," Mr. Harris continued, his voice firm. "And as such, we cater to clients who expect more than just premium cars. They expect premium service. Each one of you plays a crucial role in building and upholding our reputation, and it's imperative that we treat every individual with respect, regardless of appearances." He turned his gaze to Ethan and Lucas, who looked down, their postures tense. "Ethan, Lucas," Mr. Harris said, his tone serious, "you've both been with us long enough to know our standards. And yet you chose to judge Mr. McCall, assuming his appearance was an indication of his worth. This is unacceptable, and it reflects poorly on all of us. If it weren't for Mr. McCall's patience, this incident could have turned into a much bigger issue for our brand." Mr. Harris sighed, his voice softening slightly as he addressed the rest of the staff. "But let this be a reminder to all of us that every customer represents an opportunity for us to grow, not just financially, but ethically. Today, we begin implementing new standards for customer service. Every member of our team will undergo training, starting this afternoon, to ensure that this dealership represents the values we stand for." As Mr. Harris wrapped up the meeting, he caught Sarah's eye and gave her a nod, silently acknowledging her positive role in the events that had unfolded. She felt a sense of pride in knowing she'd done her part, however small, to treat Jared with dignity. Meanwhile, across town, Jared was at his office, finishing up a few business calls before his scheduled visit to the dealership to pick up his new car. As the CEO of a growing company that specialized in advanced automotive manufacturing, he was well aware of how reputations were built and how easily they could be tarnished. Jared had never planned for his visit to the dealership to turn into a lesson, but he was grateful for the opportunity to address the issue. As a leader, he valued the importance of seeing people for who they were, not for how they looked. When Jared's business associate Robert Carter joined him in his office, he gave Jared a knowing look. "Ready to pick up that car, Jared?" Jared chuckled, glancing at his watch. "More than ready. But it's not just about the car. I want to see if the manager followed through with his promises." Robert nodded in agreement, his eyes thoughtful. "You're doing more than buying a car, you know. You've set an example for everyone at that dealership, especially the ones who were quick to judge." Jared leaned back, crossing his arms. "If they're serious about change, they'll start treating every customer with respect, not just the ones who walk in wearing designer suits. Respect shouldn't have a dress code." The two men shared a look of mutual understanding before heading out. When Jared and Robert arrived at the dealership that afternoon, they noticed an immediate change in the atmosphere. The staff were more attentive, standing ready to greet them with welcoming smiles. Sarah, at the reception desk, waved at them and walked over, her expression bright. "Welcome back, Mr. McCall," she said warmly. "Your car is ready, and Mr. Harris is waiting for you in his office." Jared returned her smile. Thank you, Sarah. It's good to see you again. As they made their way to Mr. Harris's office, Jared couldn't help but notice that several of the staff members were watching him with a mix of curiosity and respect. He could feel the shift in attitude. It was subtle, but noticeable. Mr. Harris greeted them warmly, shaking their hands with a genuine smile. Mr. McCall, Mr. Carter, welcome back. I'm pleased to let you know that everything is ready for the final transaction. Jared nodded. Thank you, Mr. Harris. I'm looking forward to taking the car home. Mr. Harris's face held a hint of pride, but also a flicker of nervousness. Mr. McCall, I want you to know that we've taken your feedback seriously. We're implementing new customer service protocols to ensure every customer receives the respect they deserve. Your visit was eye-opening for us, and I appreciate the chance you gave us to improve. Jared looked him in the eye, gauging the sincerity of his words. I appreciate that, Mr. Harris. It's not easy to change a culture, but it's a step in the right direction. I hope you continue to build on this. As they finalized the paperwork, Jared handed Mr. Harris a business card. If you ever need advice on managing change, give me a call. Change is a constant in any business, and it's the way we adapt that makes the difference. Mr. Harris accepted the card, nodding appreciatively. Thank you, Mr. McCall. I will keep that in mind. With the transaction complete, Mr. Harris led them to the showroom floor, where the gleaming red convertible awaited, ready to be driven off the lot. Jared's face lit up as he ran his hand along the sleek, polished surface, feeling the cool metal under his fingertips. The car was a work of art, and he admired the dedication that had gone into its design and craftsmanship. Several staff members gathered around, watching as Jared inspected the car. Sarah approached him, holding out a small wrapped box. Mr. McCall, this is a gift from the dealership, a token of our appreciation. Jared raised an eyebrow, surprised. Thank you, Sarah. That's very kind of you. He unwrapped the box and found a set of custom leather gloves with his initials embossed on them. It was a thoughtful gesture, and he nodded appreciatively. These are perfect. Thank you. Before leaving, Jared turned to Sarah, holding her gaze. Thank you for being one of the few who treated me with respect from the start. You set an example, and I hope your colleagues learned from it. Sarah smiled, touched by his words. Thank you, Mr. McCall. It was a pleasure working with you. As Jared settled into the driver's seat of his new car, Robert took the passenger seat beside him. They fastened their seatbelts, and Jared grinned as he started the engine, the powerful rumble filling the showroom. Mr. Harris and the staff watched as Jared drove out of the dealership, leaving a lasting impression in his wake. Back in the dealership, the staff members stood silently, watching the red convertible disappear down the road. The visit had left a mark on them all, especially Ethan and Lucas, who were still reeling from the consequences of their actions. Mr. Harris cleared his throat, gathering everyone's attention. Let this be a lesson to all of us, he said, his voice solemn. Our reputation isn't built on the cars we sell. It's built on the way we treat people. Let's make sure that from this day forward, every customer who walks through those doors is met with the respect and kindness they deserve. The team dispersed, each member taking a moment to reflect on the lesson they had learned. For Sarah, it was a moment of validation. She had followed her instincts, treating Jared with respect despite her colleagues' judgment, and she felt a renewed sense of pride in her role. For Ethan and Lucas, it was a humbling experience. They realized how close they had come to costing the dealership not just a sale, but its reputation. They'd been given a second chance, and they knew they had a long wait to go in proving they could live up to the standards Mr. Harris expected of them. As the day wore on, the dealership resumed its usual pace, but there was a new energy in the air, a commitment to live up to the lesson Jared had left behind. And as the sun set over the dealership that evening, the staff knew that they were embarking on a new chapter, one rooted in respect, integrity, and the realization that reputation is built one interaction at a time. Ripple effects. In the days that followed, Jared's visit became the talk of the dealership and quickly spread throughout the community. Customers and staff alike sensed the subtle, yet powerful, changes taking place within the dealership. Even regular clients who hadn't been there during the initial confrontation noticed the difference in the attentiveness and genuine warmth radiating from the staff. The employees had adopted a new standard of respect that permeated their interactions, inspired not only by the changes in protocol, but by the impact of Jared's quiet dignity and the lessons they'd learned from him. But Jared's influence went beyond the dealership walls. News of the incident circulated among local business networks, eventually reaching Jared's own circle of contacts. Several business owners reached out to him, expressing admiration for how he'd handled the situation. He received emails and phone calls from colleagues who were impressed by his approach and, more importantly, moved by the lesson he had taught through his actions rather than his words. They wanted to know more about his philosophy on leadership and how they could incorporate similar values into their own businesses. Jared hadn't anticipated such a response. He had gone to the dealership simply to buy a car, but it seemed that a small spark had ignited a wave of introspection in people from different walks of life. Inspired by the outpouring of support, he decided to take his experience further by writing an open letter to local businesses. In it, he spoke about the importance of respect, empathy, and looking beyond appearances, a message he felt was especially important in a world that often judged too quickly. Every person who enters your establishment has a story, a value beyond what they may appear to offer on the surface, he wrote. True success comes not from transactions, but from building connections, from seeing people as they are, not as they seem. This is the type of respect that has the power to elevate a business beyond profit margins. Jared sent the letter to local publications, and it was soon picked up by several community blogs, sparking a conversation about professionalism, empathy, and the power of first impressions. It wasn't long before his letter began to receive attention on social media, where people shared his story, tagging friends and colleagues, and sharing their own experiences of judgment and kindness. The letter resonated deeply, reaching people from all backgrounds who had experienced both sides of the respect equation. Back at the dealership, Mr. Harris was paying close attention to the waves Jared's story was creating. He recognized the impact of Jared's letter, which seemed to bring the community together in a rare moment of reflection. It reinforced his decision to make changes, and he became even more committed to upholding the new standards in his own business. He gathered the team once more, this time with a clear vision in mind. Our reputation has always been based on our products, but from now on, it will be built on the way we treat people. We want our dealership to be known as a place where everyone feels valued and respected. This isn't just about what happened with Mr. McCall. It's about changing who we are and what we stand for. Ethan and Lucas sat in the back, listening intently. Both had been deeply affected by the aftermath of their treatment of Jared. They'd seen the change in Mr. Harris' attitude, the shift in the dealership's culture, and the way their own reputations had been impacted by their actions. Each day since that incident, they had been working to prove their commitment to the new values Mr. Harris had set. They knew they couldn't erase their mistakes, but they were determined to earn back the trust of their team, and most importantly, of future customers. For Sarah, who had always believed in treating others with respect, Jared's visit validated her own values. It wasn't just that she'd been proven right. She felt encouraged to continue to be herself and to act with kindness, knowing that it mattered. She had seen the way one person's quiet example had set an entire business on a new path, and it inspired her to continue leading by example, even when others doubted her. A month after Jared's initial visit, the dealership hosted a special event to unveil their latest models, a showcase of luxury cars designed to attract high-end clients and car enthusiasts alike. The event was invitation only, drawing a crowd of influential figures from the community, including local business owners, media representatives, and longtime clients. Mr. Harris hoped the event would be an opportunity to rebuild the dealership's reputation, not just as a place for luxury cars, but as a business that valued its customers. The showroom was transformed for the occasion, with red carpets, soft lighting, and elegantly arranged displays that highlighted each vehicle's unique features. Servers in crisp white uniforms moved through the crowd with trays of appetizers, and a small jazz band played softly in the background, creating an atmosphere of sophistication and warmth. As the event reached its peak, Mr. Harris took to the small stage at the front of the showroom. He addressed the crowd with a welcoming smile, thanking everyone for attending. But as he spoke, he didn't just focus on the cars or the dealership's achievements. Instead, he shared a story of change. "Today, we're not just here to showcase our latest models," he began, "but to share a journey we've been on as a team. Recently, we were reminded of the importance of seeing every person who walks through our doors as more than just a customer. We were reminded that respect is not something that should be earned by appearances, but something that should be given freely to everyone. This experience has changed us, and we're committed to upholding these values in everything we do." The audience listened intently, some nodding in agreement, others surprised by the candid admission. Jared, standing near the back of the crowd with Robert, listened quietly. He hadn't expected Mr. Harris to publicly acknowledge the events that had sparked these changes, and he felt a sense of respect for the manager's willingness to admit the dealership's faults. Mr. Harris concluded his speech with a nod toward Jared, his voice filled with gratitude. "One of our guests tonight showed us what it means to lead by example, not with words but with actions. Mr. Jared McCall, thank you for helping us become better, not just as a dealership, but as individuals." There was a ripple of applause, and Jared gave a humble nod, acknowledging the recognition without drawing attention to himself. As the applause died down, people turned to shake his hand, offering words of appreciation and admiration. Jared responded with his usual warmth, greeting each person with kindness, seeing the impact his visit had made in their eyes. After the event, as the guests slowly began to leave, Mr. Harris approached Jared and Robert with a look of genuine respect. "Thank you, Mr. McCall. I don't think I realized how much we needed to change until you showed us." Jared smiled, extending a hand. "Thank you for having the courage to follow through. It's not easy to make changes like this, but it's worth it." They shook hands, a moment of mutual understanding passing between them. Mr. Harris then handed Jared an envelope. "As a gesture of appreciation, we'd like to offer you a complimentary service package for your new car. It's a small way for us to thank you for everything you've done for us." Jared accepted the envelope with a nod. "I appreciate that, Mr. Harris. It's not about the package, though. It's about the people here." As Jared and Robert left the dealership that night, they couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. Robert gave Jared a knowing look as they reached his car. "You've done something big here, Jared. You've shown people what real leadership looks like." Jared smiled, reflecting on the journey he'd unintentionally embarked on. "I guess it's true what they say," he replied. "Sometimes, the smallest actions can have the biggest impact." Back at the dealership, the staff began cleaning up after the event, their conversations quieter but filled with a new sense of purpose. Sarah, Ethan, Lucas, and the rest of the team felt a shared responsibility to uphold the values they had committed to. They knew that every customer interaction from that day forward was an opportunity to put what they had learned into practice. And so, Jared's legacy at the dealership continued to ripple outward, a reminder that respect, humility, and empathy were not just ideals to strive for. They were the foundation of true success. Each member of the dealership carried this lesson with them, knowing that it wasn't just the cars they sold or the profits they earned that defined them, but the way they treated people every day. It was a lesson they would carry with them for a lifetime, a testament to the power of quiet integrity. A legacy of change. 6 months had passed since Jared McCall's visit to the dealership, yet his influence was still profoundly felt within its walls and beyond. The dealership had undergone a transformation that extended far beyond a simple shift in customer service protocols. It had redefined itself. The changes were not only visible in how staff interacted with customers, but they also resonated in the dealership's reputation within the community. Word had spread about the dealership's commitment to treating every person who walked through its doors with respect, regardless of their background or appearance. This shift, inspired by Jared's encounter, attracted a new kind of clientele, people who valued being treated with integrity, who appreciated the dealership's commitment to authenticity. Among them were former clients who had once felt uncomfortable in the exclusive environment. For the first time, they felt welcome, knowing they would be met with sincerity rather than judgment. Mr. Harris, the manager, had led the dealership through a series of initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity, empathy, and respect. He held regular meetings to remind his team of the dealership's new core values and the importance of seeing people for who they were beyond their appearances. He even instituted a mentorship program, where senior employees would work with newer team members to instill these values from the very beginning of their careers. Mr. Harris himself had transformed. His once business-oriented mindset had grown to include a focus on people and the experiences they carried away from his dealership. One spring morning, Mr. Harris received a letter in the mail, printed on fine stationery with a familiar logo. The letter was from Jared, who had taken the time to write about his experiences driving his new convertible, expressing how much he appreciated the service improvements he'd seen at the dealership since his visit. In the letter, he shared the positive impact the dealership's transformation had had on the community. "You've shown everyone that a business can be more than just a place to buy things. You've proven it can be a place where people are respected, where they feel valued and heard. That's a rare thing," he had written. The letter moved Mr. Harris more deeply than he could express. To him, it was a validation of the effort his team had put into redefining the dealership's identity. He decided to frame Jared's letter and place it in the entryway of the showroom, where both staff and customers could read it, a daily reminder of the values that now define the dealership. Around that time, Jared himself had found renewed purpose, inspired by the reach of his initial letter to the community. He had always valued respect, but seeing the tangible impact his actions had made inspired him to go further. He decided to start a local initiative called People First, aimed at encouraging businesses to implement customer service training rooted in empathy, understanding, and inclusivity. The initiative gained quick support from local leaders, and soon, Jared was hosting workshops for small business owners, teaching them how to foster environments where respect was the foundation of every transaction. People First quickly grew into something larger than Jared had anticipated. He hosted quarterly gatherings for business owners and their teams, bringing people together to share their experiences, challenges, and successes in creating respectful workplace environments. His workshops included exercises that allowed employees to see through the eyes of their customers, learning to understand the impact of their actions and words on those they served. The initiative attracted businesses from all sectors, from restaurants and hotels to retail stores and service providers. Jared's approach was simple but powerful, and it struck a chord with people who had long sought a way to bring humanity back into their work. At one of his workshops, Jared noticed Sarah, the receptionist from the dealership, seated in the back. When he saw her, his face lit up with a warm smile, and after the session ended, he walked over to greet her. "Sarah, it's so good to see you here," he said, shaking her hand. "What brings you to the workshop?" Sarah returned his smile, grateful for his kindness. "Mr. Harris encouraged us to attend. He said that if we wanted to keep growing as a team, we needed to keep learning and connecting with others. I wouldn't miss this for anything." Jared nodded, his admiration for Mr. Harris deepening. "Your dealership has come a long way. It's inspiring to see the dedication you and your team have shown." Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. "You know, you were the one who started it all. If you hadn't come in that day, none of this would have happened. You gave us a reason to be better, to look at our own assumptions and biases. It wasn't easy, but I think we're all better people for it." Jared nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "Thank you, Sarah. I may have sparked something, but the real work came from all of you. Change happens when people care enough to make it stick. Their conversation was interrupted by several business owners who had approached Jared, eager to discuss the lessons from the workshop. Sarah stepped back, watching as Jared spoke with them, sharing insights and encouraging words. She realized that he had become a leader in more than just name. He had become a leader by example, someone who embodied the values he taught. A year later, the dealership held its annual anniversary celebration, inviting clients, community members, and local business leaders. The event was not only a showcase of luxury cars, but a celebration of the values that had come to define the dealership's reputation. Mr. Harris had extended a personal invitation to Jared, asking him to attend as the guest of honor, recognizing him as the person who had inspired their transformation. The night of the event, Jared arrived at the dealership, greeted warmly by Mr. Harris and Sarah. As he walked through the doors, he was met with handshakes and greetings from familiar faces, people who had come to know him not just as a customer, but as a friend and a mentor. During the evening, Mr. Harris took the stage to deliver a short speech, expressing his gratitude to the community and his staff for supporting the dealership's growth. He spoke about the journey they had been on, the lessons they had learned, and the importance of treating every person with respect. "To our guest of honor tonight," Mr. Harris said, gesturing toward Jared, "we owe a debt of gratitude. Jared McCall taught us that our true value as a business is not measured by the cars we sell, but by the way we make people feel. He reminded us that every person has a story, a purpose, and a dignity that deserves recognition. Thank you, Jared, for helping us become the dealership we are today." The crowd applauded, and Jared gave a modest smile, feeling humbled by the acknowledgement. When the applause died down, Jared took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces. "Thank you, everyone," he began, his voice steady and sincere. "I'm honored to be here tonight, but I want you to know that this celebration isn't just about me. It's about all of us. It's about the moments when we decide to look beyond what we see on the surface and choose to treat people with respect and kindness." He paused, allowing his words to resonate with the crowd. Change isn't easy, and it doesn't happen overnight. But every time we choose respect, we make a difference. We create spaces where people feel valued, where they feel seen. And in doing so, we create a legacy of integrity that lasts far beyond any single transaction. Jared's words were met with another round of applause, and he stepped back, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. His journey had come full circle, from a simple visit to a car dealership to a community-wide movement grounded in respect and empathy. As the evening continued, Jared mingled with the guests, sharing stories and laughter, knowing that his impact would live on through the people who had been touched by his example. He knew that his journey didn't end here. There were more businesses, more people, and more communities that needed this message, and he was ready to continue sharing it, one conversation at a time. The dealership, meanwhile, had established itself as a place where people felt truly valued, a model for businesses across the city. Jared's legacy remained, not just in the physical space, but in the hearts of those who had been transformed by his quiet strength and unwavering commitment to treating others with respect. And so, the story of Jared McCall became a cherished tale within the community, a reminder that one person's values could inspire lasting change, and that true success was measured not in wealth or possessions, but in the lives we touch and the respect we show each other, one moment at a time.